there's so much you talked about. You talked about liquid democracy, and I'm not sure if many people know.
I'm going to get to that in the second part, because that really touches more upon that. The first part of the proposal is really just about security.
Okay, and so to that degree, I think that I would want to hear from other people, because I think that this is just a poll yes or no. I think the initial challenge right there is that this is a poll yes or no on a proposal that has multiple elements. So in that way, it becomes challenging. And I want to hear from other people in the chat, like regarding what we've talked about so far. What are people thinking right now?
It's Lastrom here. Morris and I had a good conversation yesterday, and I want to piggyback off of that and recap some of it. I think we need to step back and think of how many people are actually cold storaging things and who are trying to be active in the community, and address that separately from delegation of votes. I think, like I said on the forum post and to Morris directly, that there are merits in this first instance, this first part of the proposal. I think that needs to be discussed, and then I think it can be voted upon. I don't think it should be pushed through this type of proposal this fast. I think you have on one hand a very small, and I hate to assume things, so if people are here, or Morris, you say, you told me you counted on your hand, or maybe a couple hands, how many people actually interact with Decentraland, the ecosystem, not the game, from a cold storage perspective. And do we change the way the ecosystem is derived because of security? Or do we change the security protocol for those to access the ecosystem? I think we can try to talk about real world applications and online banking and such. And, we don't all live in bubbles. We all live at some level of risk inherently as soon as you connect to the internet. So if your life is very paper and pencil and cold storage, you're going to have a really hard time in this digital age. So we accept a lot of security and risk in other facets of our lives, whether that's because it's backed by the FDIC and your bank account is insured up to a certain amount, or you have insurance on your businesses, or you have insurance personally. I think that is a different question than delegating votes and changing the ecosystem. And so that's kind of my opinion on the first part.
I totally see where you're coming from there, Lastrom. And like you said, there's merits to this, but there's challenges. And I think that's something that I've heard come up a lot, that people see value in what's being proposed here, but think that and to that degree, I think that everyone is just looking for ways to avoid some core complications that can come up by just saying we're going to open up delegation. For instance, whether it might be something as simple as making it difficult for people who are new to feel like they're stepping into a world where they can necessarily, not find themselves in the middle of a segmented click sort of system where they might step in and to that degree, I think that right now when we talk about voting power, it's based off of land, it's based off of mana holdings, it's based off of the assets that make up the ecosystem. And I think that in itself presents challenges, but to simply open delegation doesn't take into account the things such as issues with anonymous delegation and delegation of your vote to somebody who can then delegate their vote anonymously out to somebody else. I think we need some more checks and balances in place, and I think we need to think about how this is going to impact people's perspective coming into the community, and how it's going to, all of us, we arrived here and we could start creating and have this sort of freedom, that I think that we need to think about how the power dynamic is going to impact how new visitors to the ecosystem perceive and have their experience in in creation. So to that degree, is there anyone here who's new to the community? I know I've invited some people, particularly to come join the conversation. I don't know if they're in the voice chat, but if there's anybody here who's new to the community and is just seeing this for the first time, maybe we can get a fresh perspective that maybe us people who've been around aren't necessarily seeing. And I know that Morris, you are somewhat new, but I'm thinking somebody who might just be arriving, maybe this week, or even this is their first time seeing this. Maybe this is your first interaction. Feel free to unmute if you're in chat and you want to say some deep thought.
So I feel that I'm kind of relatively new here. It's
Oh, great! Yeah, please.
Yeah, kind of 100 Rainbows. I mean, relatively new in the sense that just coming familiar with this proposal, and I'm just trying to understand, I guess, the pros and cons at this stage. I mean, the positives from my perspective is that if you kind of have a whole bunch of or land and it's distributed amongst multiple wallets, that it's convenient to kind of have it all meshed into, I guess, one account. But on the other side, the negative is that I guess you could essentially act as a political party, right? And then all the votes could essentially be delegated to one entity. So I'm just trying to really digress on that, kind of understand that a little bit more, and that's, I guess, why I'm here.
I want to jump in on this because this is the argument that I keep hearing, is that one person's going to end up with all the votes. So before we actually talk about that directly, I want to take a step back and say, what do we have today? Right now, we have a form of direct democracy, right? Everyone gets to vote themselves. They use their wallets, whatever assets they have. But right now, it's unequally distributed. And you can argue if that's fair or not, because people put their money and their time into Decentraland at different times, and they all benefit from that differently. Okay, but you don't actually have direct democracy, right? So you can't look at that model and say, see, this model works. But what I can tell you is that direct democracy doesn't scale. Direct democracy works for small groups where everyone has the time to focus on the small amount of proposals that are going to come through. Gasless DAO means way more proposals, and it's not going to be point of interest proposals that are really going to be the thing that matter. Okay, while everyone's rushing to that, we're going to have really serious proposals that come through that are going to need debate and discussion, right? And not everyone has the time to do that. But if they have the time to delegate their vote to someone that they trust, they should be allowed to do that. That brings up a concept called liquid democracy. That's what I was.
I know. I want to stop you right there, though. I just want to. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I have to, because I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole before we have a rebuttal to that. My personal opinion: if you have the time to delegate your votes, you have the time to vote. I'm sorry. That's just my personal opinion. If you have the time to delegate your votes, you have the time to vote.
But you're talking about a single transaction versus a transaction potentially 5 to 10 times a day. I fundamentally don't.
And I agree with you, but that means you're an active person. Look, I'm very active in the community, but I don't pay attention to DAO that much. So maybe
because you're active, because you're active, and maybe you don't have the amount of assets that somebody has, your vote should matter more, is what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is,
wait a second. Listen. That is the way the white paper was written. That's the way Decentraland has always been. You talk about democracy, it's not. It's a plutocracy. The more you're invested in the platform, the more influence you have on the platform. That stops people walking in on day one and having the same influence as everybody else. And the Decentraland Foundation have tried their very hardest to give wealth to all of the OG creators. We've had competition after competition where people have won land and mana that's now worth an enormous amount of money. Like, some of the original Game Jam prizes are now worth hundreds of thousands of pounds because of dollars, whatever, because the price of mana has changed. If those people chose to stay and keep those assets, they now have a lot of voting power. So, even though it is a plutocracy, we have tried to give people who create for the platform the upper hand. but it's not a democracy, and people should stop talking like it is, because the way it stands right now, it simply isn't a democracy. Maybe if everybody who's bought a name gets 100 man a vote, it becomes more democratic and more of the user base get a chance to vote. But the way it's set up right now is your assets determine your voting power, and it's always been like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. And I just want to say one thing, in that let's take that into account, that we need to lend on the expertise of one another. There's people here who, we're all learning and we're all growing, and it's exciting because we're on the forefront, and liquid democracy, that hasn't been possible before, really feasible before blockchain. So it's exciting to see that as a possibility. But let's look at, looking at the facts. If we were to open, just blatantly open delegation, that would essentially allow you to just there's too much, I believe, things are too anonymous. There aren't enough checks and balances or accountability. If we talk about a liquid democracy in IRL, where you have people who are known, who are vetted, who have credentials. But if we were just to open delegation, there's nothing to prevent.
And I gotta stop you there.
Please.
The fundamental aspect of liquid democracy allows the localized person to make the assessment of trust, and that trust trickles up. So you don't need to vet everyone. The checks and balances happens from the bottom up instead of the top down.
Can I just say something fundamental? The top 10 wallets are mostly owned by exchanges. They can't delegate, they can't use their vote because it's all their liquidity. If they could delegate their vote, they could. And then the exchanges own Decentraland.
Simple as that.
Well, I think the point, though, to make along with Toonpunk is the ability to delegate votes just because you don't want to be an active member in the community. It reduces a barrier of entry for influence for active members in the community. Like, getting back to my point, there's a lot of members in here that are very active that don't have a lot of mana. However, they use their clout and their activity in the community to bring things to light in their favor, and maybe a whale or two will get behind them and vote for their proposal or vote for whatever they're pitching. Not necessarily, and it's a very fine line, not necessarily giving those voting power rights to the person creating the proposal. So if you keep the voting power with the whales, I know that might be tough for people to swallow, and that's a different conversation, but at least you create a barrier of making it too easy to amass a lot of voting power to push your proposals through. You still have to go do some campaigning and legworking and marketing and selling and convincing and persuading a whale or two to pay attention and vote on your proposal. And I think that, at least right now, is fair to discuss and maybe change that. But transferring those voting power rights to somebody else that is maybe more active than a whale or two can easily scam the system very quickly and push the ecosystem in a direction that might not be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah. You mentioned how like people have to delegate their votes, and they're going to have to do, basically it's going to trickle up, right? To that degree, the same notion that people don't have the time to research all the backgrounds and all the governance of things, what's going to give them the time to do the research on the proper delegates? What's going to happen, and very likely could happen, is that if you open delegation like that to just say you can delegate your vote to whoever, what's preventing someone from putting up a website that says we buy voting power, and we'll give you a certain amount of... And
just a quick point.
Hold on.
I'm a newbie.
You can buy people's voting power right now. You could go to anybody and say, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million if you vote this way. And then if they do, because you can see it's on the blockchain, you give them the money. If they don't get the money. That paradigm exists today.
But you still have to do that. But you still have to go to them and convince them.
Second to that, and this is something else to be discussed, and I mentioned this to Lostrom last night, in this hypothetical world where someone is willing to lend out money or give out money to buy votes, all you need to do is go to an exchange, buy your mana, move it to your MetaMask, make your proposal, move it back to the exchange, and sell it on the exchange. You get to keep your money, and you get your voting power.
So, quick question.
All the
Quick
whales
question.
have to mana stock.
I'm a newbie.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Quick.
I have to like make sure we like all the mana that you keep stockpiled can be then resold out to other people. There's a difference from going on an exchange and purchasing mana on an exchange from somebody else to having mana and then being able to leverage that out to, for instance, I mean, a company like DG, I don't blame them for voting yes on this because it would instantly increase their valuation. I mean, it allows them to take that stockpile of voting power and really sell it out to whoever they please. I mean, what's the thing preventing that from happening?
Quick question. Sorry to interrupt a fascinating discussion. I'm not a newbie, but obviously not OGs, like you guys. But there's sort of three things going on here, just from my understanding, right? There's the ability for people to delegate votes. There's the issue of cold wallets, which in essence you could use something like Gnosis Safe as a team to, do a multi-signature thing. If someone isn't around, you could delegate voting outside of Decentraland to make things happen. And then there's the possibility of people, buying and selling votes. So just from my understanding, is the proposal then for all three things? Is that what everyone's saying?
Let's read through the proposal right now with everybody here, so we can get a sense for what everything that's going on in this proposal, because I don't think it's one thing. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is that we're trying to address multiple issues with one yes or no question. And I actually don't even think that this is something that's like, the way I would say is like we're in violent agreement. Like we see these things that need to be adjusted, but I don't think the issue is that. I think the issue is whether or not this proposal is indicative of the change that needs to happen in a way that where it's going to really have a tangible, singular outcome that we can address. And so let me just read through this really quick. So with the introduction of the DAO powered by Snapshot, there is a feature within the Snapshot platform that allows for voter power VP delegation within the defined strategy of the VP calculation. Implementing this feature would allow any player to delegate VP to another player by visiting the following link and entering another player's address and the space snapshot.dcl.eth. Would you want to delegate voting power to another player? I think that right there is a question that in itself. And not to say, let's not go further. Let's just center the question around, are we okay with some form of delegation, which I'm not saying is good or bad, with maybe certain checks and balances put into place to ensure, certain malpractice or, foul play doesn't go on. Like, how do we feel? Let's just talk about that. And I mean, actually,
I still don't understand.
If Miles from DG is here, I know we talked about, I reached out to some of the people from DG about coming through, and considering that they are the largest vote behind this, I would be interested. I'm sure a lot of other people would be interested in hearing their thoughts on this, and what's having them lean in this direction.
His microphone might be messed up.
Sounds a mute issue.
I think
but you could almost split the proposal into three things by the sounds of the healthy debate. Because
hey guys, sorry, my mic was a bit off. I'm happy to weigh in on this. So the way we set up our DAO at DG is we have delegation pretty much for the pure purpose of what Morris was saying around just being able to store your assets on a secure, hardware wallet, and being able to vote like on a MetaMask that you use in DCL. And I think this is a pretty important piece. That's the reason why we're backing this. But I do see everyone's concerns. I think people that are more involved on a daily basis, obviously, should have a bigger say in a lot of different ways. And I think they do. And I don't know necessarily if the problem really is the delegation aspect, but rather, just the concentration of assets in a few wallets.
That's true.
Yeah.
Question.
Put together a proposal that allowed for us to just have the ability of one person to delegate their voting power to their central wallet, their ID. Is that possible? Technically, maybe TunePunk or some. Can we avoid?
I want to ask.
That's like a security nightmare. You're asking people to identify themselves in two places on the blockchain.
Sorry, go ahead.
Miles, is there a different solution that isn't delegating votes, but that allows cold storage wallet holders to vote? Like, could we verify them? We're not even voting on the blockchain on the snapshot thing. So
you could implement Gnosis Safe with a multi-signature wallet. I mean, that's how most people do it in Teams and DAO. It's pretty solid. A lot of people do that.
We use that, but then we're talking about a different type of user who doesn't want a multi-sig wallet, who wants a cold storage wallet, or even, like with districts, their contracts are stuck in pass-through contracts, so they can't do it. But maybe, certainly with the district leaders, we could verify them and maybe give them their voting power in a different way. And maybe if people are willing to do a KYC, if they've got cold storage wallets, we could do that. I'm not saying I have the answers to this. I don't at all. I'm just asking questions more than anything, Miles.
KYC is a great point. Thank you. And honestly,
it sounds about the least crypto thing I've ever heard.
Well, listen,
I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but if we're trying to make a certain change for cold storage wallet,
the whole point is for it to be programmatic. We're talking about the implementation of a method that's there. We're talking about giving people an option of doing something. That's what we're discussing. And all of the rest of the proposal are a few considerations as to why you might want to consider that.
So I just wanted to take a step back. I really, like I said, I really like to focus on the security. And if that's such a big deal, then maybe so. I feel personally that it's a small subset of users, and I don't want to assume, but I would like to have that broken out into a separate proposal. As I've always mentioned in the past 48 hours, there are merits to some of these things, but as the proposal currently stands, I don't think it should pass. And, allowing somebody to go buy mana, vote on a proposal, and then go sell mana is quite arduous versus saying, hey, Miles, give me your 2 million mana voting power, and I'm going to go create 10 proposals for myself and vote on them and pass them and take 5,000 proposal, build nothing, and walk away with 50 grand. I never had to go risk my mana to price fluctuation, albeit it could be very little, very quick. I never had to go to an exchange and convert. All I had to do was just ask somebody to give me their voting power. I think I would rather have to ask Miles to pay attention to my proposal, review it, and use his whale status to then vote or not vote. I don't want him to give me his 2 million mana for me to go use willy-nilly for whatever I want. I don't think that's how it should be in terms of delegation.
Why would he delegate that to you?
Why not? You always propose these why nots. That's my point.
No, but I don't understand the scenario.
But once you open the door, then I create a lobby group. I'm going to go create a lobby group, and I'm going to lobby for all the voting power, and then I become a lobbyist in the virtual world. That's not right. You're just shifting from whales to other interest groups.
How else are you going to make an impact if you weren't there 3 years ago?
I
think that's why there needs to be some. I think that's why there needs to be some sort of. Although yes, we can offer the community at large a level of being anonymous, but at the same time, I think if we're talking about delegates who are going to be impacting the entire ecosystem and potentially having a mass amount of voting power, maybe there shouldn't be a level of. Maybe there should be some transparency there in terms of who is an approved delegate? Do they hold certain credentials? Like, we need to talk about, like, what are the ways to remove that type of delegate status? Maybe we can have it be something, maybe the foundation approves. Like, we just need more, I think, as Blasphemous said, it's not an issue with this theory, this concept of liquid democracy or delegation of votes. That's not the issue. I think there's something that's trying to be achieved here with this proposal more specifically, and then subset of things that are benefits. I think if something here tangible is to be, resulted, let's talk about the individual things, such as the wanting to do a connection, right, with your own wallet address. Even if it's not, public, it can be, it can be something where it's private between the foundation or, I'm not going to get into the technical aspects, but I think, to start with saying, DG wants to be able to take action with their voting power from their main wallet, right? Versus their cold storage. There should be a way to do that without having to run into the issues that Lastrom, and that's what we're talking about, because this current proposal does present a lot of those issues, and I think there's a lot of smart people in this community on both sides of this discussion. Something that's certainly, I think, with this much of discussion that's going on, something that shouldn't just be passed on in a week. It should be something that we continue to discuss, and I'm willing to devote Thursday time every week for us to get together here, on stream when it makes sense. Of course, we'll still, have our regular, show, which is about uplifting art, and everything that Decentraland stands for is really uplifting creators to have an opportunity. And I think that everyone just wants to ensure that the next creators that come here have the same opportunity that we had to invest and grow and have that investment be resemblant of their influence in the community. And I think that was the original vision, really.
I guess people right now, they'll integrate cold storage into their MetaMask because it's an option. You can run multiple accounts and, possibly have MetaMask and, Ledger or whatever.
Yeah, Kevin, I agree with what you're saying, and I think you bring up a lot of good points. Would you be okay if we delegated our votes to you? I'm just kidding. No, but I think for us going forward, we're actually putting in a framework so that the DG holders will be able to really determine the votes on the Decentraland DAO proposals. But yeah, I think this is a good debate to be had, and for us, it's mainly about the security aspect. I don't necessarily think, especially in our DAO, like from our experience with delegation, it's really not utilized that much at all amongst, as far as I know, amongst people that hold a lot of votes. Like if there's folks that hold a lot of DG, they're usually just voting on their own, but they use it just purely for being able to use a MetaMask and not have to expose their cold storage wallet to the internet. So yeah, that's kind of what our angle was. But for in the future, obviously, for these types of votes, like we're going to tie it to our DAO and have like a slightly shorter voting period, so DG holders can allocate those votes.
That's awesome. I really like that, and I think that is totally about what this whole decentralized approach to. And I think honestly, we have to give a lot of credit to what we're actually trying to solve right here. We're almost doing, I feel like this is a very unique situation. The ability for decision making, the actual like investment, and the personally, emotionally, financially, that all these people have in the community. And I think that we can take this, and the world, this is a global community. We're going to be able to figure out and learn a lot of things, I think, that other and metaverses and people around the world can learn about when it comes to applying blockchain technology in order to make these kinds of decisions that are going to shift the control of power. There's this saying, as above, so below. We solve this on a simple scale like Decentraland, where we really care and we hold something that is of value to us. We can apply similar ideas to a grander scale. So I think this is really important. I think ultimately, whether or not it's for security, it still opens other security gaps by simply saying open delegation to whatever wallet. when your goal is to have that within your, wallet, that's another story. But I think opening it up delegation to everybody might be a little too early. But, I think a lot of the we've given some great. Is there anyone else who hasn't spoken yet who wants to maybe put in some thoughts on this? Because we definitely want to make this a community discussion. It's not, that's kind of a key element to all this. Peanut butter. We don't have your sound yet.
I'd just weigh in that basically some of the districts to get their full vote will require even a six-figure sum in gas in order to be able to actually use their vote. So that's just something to think about from a practical point of view for what's probably a third of the land in Decentraland. So I think that's pretty important as well to factor into this, that there has to be a solution to that. And this is one solution.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
District leaders need another, and district leaders need another solution. So
Can you go a little bit further on that? I would love to hear a bit more about that challenge.
Well, it's basically all districts have all of the land in the Gnosis multi-sig wallet, all of them, and there's a pass-through contract, and there is also, so there has to be a technical solution for, otherwise there's like probably 30,000 lands in district multi-sig wallets, so that's pretty important. Like, for me, that's a safer Decentraland if most of that land stays in those wallets. If a district needs to raise funds to transfer it, it's justified because you can then offset the cost of this against that. But it's basically without a solution to this, all of those districts do not have a voice in the vote. And there are things that a Decentraland University would like to propose and vote for, but it's going to cost an impractical amount of money for us to actually get that. So
because
I'm not commenting on whether so yeah, exactly. So I'm not commenting on whether delegation like this is the right solution. I'm just, as Tim Punk proposed some other solutions. There just has to be a solution, and for me, that's one of the key things. And I think that also addresses Miles's issue. In my view, there's whatever you do, it's going to be there's workarounds. Every system's corrupt in the world because it's just the way of the world. So whatever decision is made here, let's not kid ourselves into thinking that just makes it magically fairer. If from my perspective, there's pros and cons with everything. This is a nice clean solution that gets actually a lot more kind of people who are voting, but as people point out, there's ways of manipulating it. But at the end of the day, most voting systems, there are ways of manipulating it, and so from my perspective, is that there's not that much reason for someone who's a big whale to willy-nilly lend their vote to other people. Just to I can't imagine that Miles would delegate his vote, and in fact he's proposing the opposite. He feels more comfortable spreading that decision amongst the community. As a district, I would feel the same. Actually not in every case, because that's not practical, but the really important things, it means you can actually go to your community and represent them. And and if Miles doesn't carry out the wishes of his community, or if I don't, then we're going to take grief. So I think there are, let's not think of this as like a completely anonymous community where we are just all wallet addresses, because we're not. There are individuals here, people know who each other are. So I think that it's if this goes through, I think we can make the best of it, and if it doesn't go through, then we need another solution, and that solution could involve KYCs, or it could involve whatever. But for me, there's pros and cons. And
it's not about the identified whales. In the proposal, it mentions inactive investors, and to my knowledge and understanding, that's people that have speculated early on, have a bunch of land, have a bunch of voting power spread across multiple wallets, and somebody wants to vacuum them up for their own personal gain. and do things willy-nilly. That's what I mean by that. I don't think Miles is just going to shill out his voting power to whomever asks for it. I think, again, as the proposal reads and states, it mentions activating inactive investors through the delegation of voting rights. And I personally disagree with that wholeheartedly. I like I mentioned before, have merits for the multi-sig wallet and security, and understanding that concept. And 30,000 pieces of land and a 90,000 piece of land world is significant. But at what cost to the direction of the ecosystem do we activate these inactive investors through their delegation of voting power? That's my biggest concern with all of this. It's not the active people. It's not the district leaders. It's not Miles. It's not Carl. It's not Maddie. It's not anybody else who just bought 700,000 worth of or whatever land. It's the inactive people that are trying to be activated that concerns me.
Yeah, but doesn't it concern you more that 30,000 active members are inactive because of the lack of the solution? That's what you can put the solution in that. Okay, a KYC could be a possible solution, but then that's going to bring equal issues. It's going to upset other people who feel just as strongly about that as you do about that perspective. All I'm saying is this is one of those political arguments. It's like a Brexit. Half the people are going to be annoyed with the outcome of this, and that's the way it goes.
Maybe we can find solutions that work for everybody. I just want to point out that it's worth noting that these kind of polls are non-binding, and the idea of them is to get community feedback. So just as important as voting is writing stuff on the forum, writing your ideas and stuff. So, that's logged somewhere and people can read it.
Absolutely. And I think that is kind of the key here, because no one of us has the answers that it's going to serve all of us. We need the opportunities to talk and discuss. And actually, I would suggest that before putting a proposal out, especially one that impacts everybody, I think it's just courtesy, post something on the forum. Go on there and post your idea on the forum and get people's input and see. And if you really, if you want to see what's going to be the best solution and you're willing to really listen and lean on the expertise of others, I think that's a great thing that everyone can do.
Kevin, actually, what happens if you post one of these poll proposals, it automatically goes on the forum and starts the discussion. So,
yes, that's true. So if you post something on like a poll on the DAO, whatever, it'll automatically load that into the forum. So you'll still have the opportunity to talk. I'm suggesting that ultimately, if you are thinking about making a proposal, it is still worthwhile for you to put that into the forum as its own thing prior to putting that into the DAO, to really gauge the thoughts and opinions of people in the community. And that, for me at least, in what I've been doing, has been a very useful means of understanding how to improve and be better and have better ideas that really serve everybody. And in that way, I think we're all learning how to do this. But really, I think that there's, as Toonpunk said, this isn't locking in the future for, everything the way it's written is now as is through this poll. We're going to get an idea. And I think the idea that we're getting here is that what we want is to be able to access our voting power, not having to pay all this gas to move over our land all over the place or move assets and do that in order to really access that voting power efficiently. And that can be accomplished. I think ultimately there's another part of this, which is to say there is a risk of increasing the corruptibility of the ecosystem if this isn't done in a fashion that takes into account all the risks. It's not something where I'll say it's inherent or the intention, but you can take it from somebody who started a lot of projects. You can do a lot of things because you care and you want to solve a problem. And in the moment, you think you put up a solution, and it turns out that there were certain things that you didn't foresee. That's why we have to lean on the expertise of people within the community. And for that, there's a lot of stuff that we remember that the DAO is now open, gasless. There's a lot of things that now are going to start coming into the system that I don't think it's appropriate for us to incentivize taking away our studying and our learning and our awareness of the decisions that are making. Let's maybe hold off on that idea of delegating our decisions outward. I think we're a small enough community, and to the point that it's more healthy for our community to be educated and aware and making the decisions individually before necessarily delegating that outwards. I think that it's very early, and I think that's the sentiment that I'm feeling from a lot of people. I'm sorry. Yeah, James, were you going to say something?
No, I wouldn't actually. No, I mean, from my perspective, I'm actually, quite passive on this. There's like, we've lived with this situation for quite some time, and we can live with it for a bit longer until the proper solution comes around. But there has to be a solution. If we're here in sort of 3 months and the DAO is ploughing forwards and people are putting wearable votes through and the districts are not involved, then a district like Vegas is just going to end up, having to take enough land out of the wallet to be able to do the things it needs to do. So it'll happen anyway, and it's just going to be, So from my perspective, we're not going to, for example, I could put even just with the land that's not in the multi-sig wallet, we could sway this vote either way, but I'm going to stay out of it, to be honest, because I can see the pros and cons. I can see both points of view. But from my perspective, if it's a KYC, if it's a delegated vote, I don't mind whatever it is, but it has to be soon, because when other people are voting through wearables and I'm not able to, for us, that's when the problem becomes something that needs to be resolved.
100%.
That's sort of my perspective on it.
100%. So ultimately, this is an important thing that we need to do here is make it feasible. You're saying, James, you're saying that right now, basically, it's not feasible for you as a district leader for you to vote on the proposals or the items that you need to vote on.
Well, I wouldn't be able to because, I would, because we have some land and we have some manor. So we would still have a substantial vote, actually, but we wouldn't have the vote that we should have. And it's, I'm not thinking about it even from the point of view of swaying arguments where I can see both sides. I'm just thinking of the practicalities that to actually operate in Decentraland, we need to have the vote, which is to, do things like, put our wearables through. We have clients that would like to have them. So it's going to be a real problem for us if we can't actually do that under our own steam. So from my perspective, all I would like is to see the solution worked on as a priority, and I'm sure that's going to happen one way or another.
So to be clear, most districts are in the same situation, that the only way to use their land to vote would be to move the land, and with a district of any substantial size, that's a very expensive thing to do at the moment.
Exactly. And so, in situations like this, I honestly think it's so sensitive to the point that it's worthwhile addressing each one of these issues one at a time. If we can have a solution that allows district leaders to sync those votes to and if is it possible to limit the delegation component of Snapshot in that way, though?
I'm sure we could find a solution for each separate issue if that's the way everyone decides you want to go. I'm sure we can look at the tech and how we can. Is Killian here?
Yeah, maybe for now we could even we don't even need to remove the current. I think that the current it opens a scope of a lot of elements. Personally, and Morris, you can unmute and comment on this, but I personally think that it would be best, personally, I think if we just, look at these one item at a time. And to that degree, since this isn't a binding element, TunePunk, so say this poll goes through, would that then be to say we would want to now look, since it's having many different things that are speculated on in one proposal, how would that move forward? Like, what would we do to say?
Okay, the bottom line is the truth of this is the foundation are rolling out the DAO cautiously. So, like, there's no precedent right now for what if this poll passes, then we, the foundation and the community need to talk about what that actually means, because at the moment it's just a way to gauge community sentiment on that particular proposal.
So basically,
sorry, I am just delivering news here. You have to understand, like, I often have a lot of the same feelings towards these things as the community do, and I put your cases forward, and I always make sure that your voices are heard. But it doesn't always work out the way I want either.
Absolutely. I mean, boss, would you be willing to address these individual matters on separate proposals rather than one proposal that might rub the community the wrong way? Can we, would DG, or maybe that's something you can put past the DG community and get their sentiment on it? Are we willing to address these issues in a way that doesn't disregard the concerns of certain members? Not to say that there aren't concerns on both ends, but ultimately, I mean, specifically with the solution, not the concern with the problems, but the concerns around the solution that's being presented. Would DG be willing to look at exploring this on a different proposal rather than moving ahead with this one?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think if you guys decide that you want to address this in a few different proposals and propose different solutions for the different points separately, I'm more than happy to pursue that. I would just say, I understand that the concern here is inactive whales giving too much power to whoever that's hitting them up and trying to grab their voting power. But to be honest, I just don't really obviously I'll let you guys know about our concern about delegation to another wallet within DG and for security purposes. But I don't know. I mean, delegation has worked okay for us. We haven't really had that issue. I guess it could happen to Decentraland, but we should take a look at other DAOs as well. A lot of them do it. But yeah, I do understand that concern though. Yeah.
So just one other thing in the university, we work with the Blockchain Education Network, and that is an example of a delegated vote. They have a huge vote in the Uniswap, for example, and so I don't know. I just think that this is one of those things whereby I can just see as many issues with whatever direction that actually goes. And then, for example, I'm just looking at the top mana holders on Etherscan at the moment. There are holders that can just make the decisions here. When you look at the actual, the really big whales. So I'm not sure. I think that as this goes and corporations and Decentraland gets bigger and bigger, I don't know. I think I can't see that. Okay. I mean, I suppose there's a risk that there's a trade in the delegated votes, but I don't know. I think it seems like this is open source, stuff. If it goes, if the community takes it, too far in the wrong direction, then things move in another direction. Like Second Life, for example, it defected into OpenSim as well, and it ended up that a big percentage of the users moved across to there because they didn't like the way London labs were working. Let's not forget that all of Decentraland is open source. That it will be also governed by the project as a whole. It can go off the rails in all sorts of ways, and one of the dangers with the DAO is that we get focused on a lot of the political matters and, for example, the technical matters. Like I would like to see, and if I could get some voting power, I would like to see, some, for example, the foundation to focus on the linear scaling of the number of our Catalyst servers, so that it's not like a last minute rush to scale up the network when we suddenly see an exponential growth spike in users. I see a lot of technical things that the DAO is important for, and especially people who are having to work with bigger estates of land, they'll be well aware of some of the technical issues as well, like just in the practicality of things. And it's like if the DAO becomes too political, the danger is it's going to gloss over the really important things, like, for example, a content moderation, how we deal with things when actually like bad things start happening. And there's 30,000 lands with inactive votes, so I would call it a priority to basically that is the counterpoint to the inactive landowners delegating their vote. You can ask yourself which is more damaging, because it's like
I think
Well, I mean,
I think that's a really
just
good
to touch
point
on
about that.
like your point quickly. I think it's a huge risk. I mean, look, we're 3 days into the new DAO and someone's already proposing delegating votes, and again, it's already become that is political. I mean, I don't know the motive behind it, especially with a 2-part proposal in one. I get the security. I understand that completely. The political nature is this offloading of your voting rights to somebody else for whatever quid pro quo. It can be whatever, and that by nature is political. So for this to be rolled out in day 3 of the DAO, in my eyes, is very political. I believe the whales that control things now, yes, that's a different aspect that needs to be addressed. But I think you leveraging or reaching out to them on your behalf, getting them active, right? Flipping them to be active. I think that is on you. The onus is on you as a proposal creator to get something done versus going and amassing voting power and then having that massive amount of political clout to go and influence the direction of the ecosystem.
I think that is, I think it's going to be harder to go and persuade people to give you a bunch of delegated votes than it is to persuade people of your way of thinking. To be honest, I think because you're looking at persuading a bunch of like probably very successful and probably smart individuals, because most of the people in Decentraland community aren't stupid. It's not like there's a bunch of people hanging out not really sort of understanding. I actually think that it would take just as much effort to rally around. And don't forget the complexity of of doing that. Just putting on a campaign like based on information and persuasion and hiring a cool person to persuade. You can't. There's corruption everywhere, and there's much more subtle ways, and people are much more defenseless against those things. And that's actually look at Brexit. That's got nothing to do with the corruption in the political system. It's got everything to do with misinformation and persuasion. So I think that whatever, with the best will in the world, here you're basically casting out the utility that would resolve an issue for a lot of people on the basis of a what if, because we don't have the hard stats on it. Yeah, we do have hard stats on how many more active people this could possibly bring in. We don't have hard stats on
Sure.
actually how many of those votes would be delegated. That is speculation. So,
I feel like this
Right.
would,
I mean, that's just the second part of the proposal, like I said, is what I have the biggest issue. And as it reads, it says not all players or asset holders will participate in proposal review and voting. This proposal allows passive investors to exercise their VP by delegating it to players who have a shared vision for Decentraland. So that in itself sounds like a lobby. And you have to lobby to get those passive votes, and they now become active. And so for whatever reason, that inactive investor has now divulged his voting rights to somebody, whether it was a bribe, a barter, an influence, a quid pro quo, a something, versus letting them stay dormant and allowing that dormant inactive investor to become active and to become a participant and engage in things that really do matter, where they can press their finger on the scale and tip it in a favor.
Yeah, but how do you prevent the reverse of that? How do you prevent me saying to a Bowes, here's 50k in your back pocket, can you vote for me? And he'll go, yeah, all right. It's basically if he wasn't going to vote, how do you prevent that? You can't.
Yeah, but now I can go create 10 different addresses, ask Maddie to give me his voting power, and if he likes me, he'll give it to me, and then I go vote on my own proposals for 5,000 each proposal for a grant that sounds like a cool idea, and then I never do anything, and I just walk away with 50 grand, and then I say, hey, Maddie, you know what? I'm going to delegate your votes back to you. I'm out of Decentraland. I don't really care, and I just walk away with $50,000.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he already do that though? Why do we need something in place to do that? Wouldn't you just pay him, then he votes anyways? We don't need like a middle.
I understand that, yes, but there's a barrier there. I mean, the option for Marty to do that or not, it's on him versus me.
Yeah, but it's so easy to call Matty and say, hey, can we do this? It's just as you're talking about one set of steps versus another set of steps, like a recipe that's got like.
I would rather have him walk the steps versus. I would rather have him walk the steps than me do it for him. I would rather have him walk the steps, whatever the quid pro quo is between me and the whale, versus him giving me the rights and me walking the steps myself.
Well, I could argue though that with the delegated vote, at least you have some information that the vote's been delegated, whereas you've got no idea at all that the vote's been delegated in your world.
I mean, as the proposal states, inactive investors probably have no idea what's going on, and like they said, as the DAO grows and proposals grow, it will be difficult to sift through them. I totally understand that, but that doesn't mean you should just give out your vote to somebody else because you don't have enough time to care to look through a couple of proposals that might catch your eye.
And I think this is, I don't think people are necessarily against the opportunities that delegation is going to offer. I mean, there's plenty of circumstances we can all agree on where it's valuable for us to have this as a feasible, as something that we can do as a community. At the same time, I think that we need to not rush this process. I think that there's more discussion that should be had around this topic to really have something that is sustainable and really, so it's not like, oh, let's try this out and see what works, because that puts a lot at risk. Why not just simply say, let's put a proposal out, and I'm willing, if I'll put a poll out there that just says something of, are we willing to open up delegation for, not going into the technical matters, but to have Foundation look for ways for the districts to specifically delegate their voting power to themselves to make that feasible for them to activate their voting. I think that is where we need to start as a community, continue this conversation, and then address these other matters, because we can go for another 4 hours, but we need time. We need more time. And there's actually something to be said that the way that people hurt themselves in healthcare, this is something a doctor told me, the way people hurt themselves isn't by slow movements, it's by fast movements. And when you're dealing in business, when you're dealing in large distributed systems, the biggest risk isn't bringing on new users. It's actually scaling and growing fast. We are scaling and growing fast. Right. We are at the greatest risk point of this.
Kevin. Kevin.
I think
I want to just point one thing out, though, is that how many days have we gone with the DAO here, and we've got one controversial issue. If we delay this, then and actually just say actually our voting system's invalid, what effectively. Listen, Kevin. What happens if there's another controversial issue tomorrow and then another one the next day? You're going to keep pushing it. All I'm saying is that there's depending on your perspective, there's controversy everywhere. So how is this? My concern is that we're kicking the can down the road because other things will come up because we're all busy.
Identifying one specific thing within this proposal that we all agree on should happen, that the districts should be able to access their voting power from other storages. That is something that we can, I think that is easier for us to, as a community, to agree on at this point. It's not kicking the can down the road. It's saying, what is the single thing that we can decide on right now that we can all agree on, and then let's move forward. So definitely don't want you to think that I'm trying to delay controversial things, but rather make sure that it's, I'm just one person. I have my voting power, and by all means, like, just my opinion, but for me,
I think, James, you raise a good point there, James. You said earlier around, linear scaling and some of the technical aspects, open source, blah, 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 etc., where it's only going to get more complicated as more decisions come in and, not just political threads, but the technical elements, for the DAO to consider.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah, and I think like that's a great point. That should be figured out.
I don't know if the district issue can be solved without a DAO vote as well. I think the tech team are already looking into this, so that's another thing to take into consideration. I'll speak to Nacho tomorrow and see if that is already being worked on.
There you go. So if we have the problem with the DAO already being solved, where, can we wait before we change an entire power structure, for a problem that will be solved right now that could potentially be solved without that change? That's the thing. I feel like there's so many decisions here that are trying to be put into one proposal, when the biggest issue that we've been talking about, it could potentially be solved without a DAO vote.
Yeah, I just, I'd like to know what, the impetus for this proposal. I mean, like I said, this is so early on in the DAO, and to have this delegation topic just immediately pierces the veil of why was this created? And if it's the first part, that's very technical, and that can be at least tackled or tried to be managed. I think the second part, 3 days into the DAO and trying to already force that through, is something, in my opinion, needs to be discussed way further and have way more structure around. And I don't know, I would love to hear from Miles, because they do have a DAO. It is a lot longer in existence than what this new DAO is for Decentraland. But my personal opinion is there's an ulterior motive here if it's outside of the first step. And the first step being security for cold storage wallets. If that was the proposal for itself, and it said, hey, let's figure out how we can amass all of your wallets you control into a single tier from your cold wallets, fantastic. I don't know how that differentiates from delegations in terms of technicals, but the way this was brought so fast and approached, I think is very off-putting, especially when it's lumped in with the second part.
I agree.
And so I would love to hear from Morris or Miles on the actual thought process of why this was thrown in 3 days in, and sandwiched with the technical of cold storage and voting with cold storage, because that sounds like the majority of the issue, at least again from my point of view, is district leaders want to be able to vote with their cold storage, and it sounds like private citizens and community members as well. So the second part loosely is tied to it, but the way it's pitched is conversion of inactive to active, and it opens a whole can of worms on day 3. And so I just would like to know why on day 3 that can of worms is being brought to the table.
To be honest, calling it a can of worms is a matter of perspective. I understand it's not the way you want to see it go, but the reality of it is some people aren't going to be playing. And when I say passive investor, I don't necessarily mean somebody who doesn't pay attention. Somebody doesn't have to log in every day, and they can still be passive. They still want to know what's going on, but they don't want to vote. They want their friend to vote for them. I don't think that's a problem. So I don't want you to only focus on the security of it, because
sorry if I'm over talking, but I can't hear Morris at all.
Democracy is a thing.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Morris?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I could. For some reason, yeah, I couldn't hear you before. Now I can. Yeah.
Okay. So when I wrote first of all, when I wrote why would you want to delegate voting power to another player, I just started telling you guys why I think you might want to do that. I'm sure other people have reasons I didn't think of, and to be honest, I didn't understand the district's problems, and now that should probably be highlighted here. Right? We should be informing more people of the issues of why you might want to delegate voting power. Okay? The security, definitely an issue. And then again, with proxying your vote, I definitely believe that's a thing. As crypto enables us to have this sort of liquid democracy, that to me is how you're going to get a true democracy.
Okay. All right. So why on day 3 are you trying to push a liquid democracy when the world is like a year and a half old? I mean, these things take
a form of democracy that I want to see in the space, right? If I don't want to live 10 years under one form to say, okay, now it's ready to transition. What's the point of that?
And why not put a poll that says, are we willing to explore applying the principles of liquid democracy to Decentraland? I feel like that is a lot more
reasons in there, and we're talking about them, and we can explain reasons if people are interested. People aren't giving us their voting power right now anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's
the people here. It's the people here that are going to vote.
And right now we see that even on the vote as is, even if it was just the Central Games deciding on this, they would still have the yes. And is like.
So it's interesting, right?
The fact that the largest voting power players are voting in favor of something, and it's in spite of the concerns of a larger population. And I think that alone, for the people who are creating this proposal, if they're doing it for the reason of serving the community, that should be enough reason for us to say we need to readdress this proposal, because that should mean something to you, don't you think?
I suppose the concept of the DAO is lost on me if we can't put up proposals and they're not binding.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think, to be honest, I think that this, if you start, selectively choosing, if this is rejected, this invalidates this mechanism for me, in my eyes. I mean, I don't see why people will, okay, it can be advisory at this point. We could say that for a period of time, as Two Punks said, it's a guidance thing. But it is going to lose credibility if there's a vote one way or the other and it doesn't pass. I mean,
there are binding.
I need to actually.
It's just this category that isn't binding,
and it doesn't invalidate it.
Poll, I see. Yeah, it's a poll.
It doesn't invalidate it because it's a simple poll. You can't solve a complex issue that we're talking about in 3 paragraphs and expect that to be the solution. You can't, we're trying to talk about applying a liquid democracy with a yes/no question, 3 paragraphs, and saying go ahead and decide. That's an issue, and so that is like, if you're saying that this decides, if we don't move ahead with this, just this votes yes, and we don't move ahead, it would invalidate it. What would invalidate? Stop the.
It's a poll. I didn't realize it was actually. I wasn't actually looking at the word. Poll. That's the case.
Also, the system in place was debated for a long time, like a year and a half in Discord. Loads of people wrote different white papers and wrote different proposals. The community shot them all down. Eventually there was a vote, and this is the system that we have in place now. Nobody's saying it's set in stone. The community can choose to change that, but like Kevin said, in a 1-paragraph proposal and a weak vote, that's hard to swallow when what we have now went through so much rigorous debate.
100%. And I think if anything, these polls, just to even set the stage for this, like, these polls are good ways for us to decide what conversations we need to be focusing on. From there, we can set up a way for more in-depth proposals that have specific frameworks. And just as the same way there were multiple white papers and really a lot of debate around how to move forward. He said a year. Why aren't we bringing experts in governance and experts in in the science of what we're trying to deal with right now, and bring a more thorough proposal? I think even to discuss something like delegation, even before we get to decide will people delegate their vote for someone to look through that long proposal, we need to go through people looking through those long proposals and really educating themselves and have a thorough decision on what we're really buying ourselves into. And to that degree, I think we can all rest assured that I think that the DAO has been successful. We have 40 people here who've been here who are members of the community. I think there must be millions worth of voting power here, and I think as heated as it may get, I think can we all agree that we're happy to continue having opportunities like this for healthy discussion around these topics? You know, not to say we're all expected to state our opinion, but the fact that we can all get together, I think this is just as important as having a DAO, is having a community in a town hall setting where we can get together and discuss these things, you know, openly, and we can improve how we're doing this as well. So things like timers to make sure I'm not ranting too much, right? Like things like that, I think we can continue to grow, but not doing so on a little piece of information. In my opinion, what anyone who's assuming that a vote like this could really change the bottom line structural power dynamic of Decentraland is someone who operates off of little information, and that's just not, you know, that's just not feasible. So voting on this is like voting on what we want to discuss. Does that make sense, or am I wrong in that?
Well, one thing's for sure, it's only going to get more complicated, more complex as time goes on. So it's probably not a bad idea.
I would agree with this. You know, it's going to get more and more complicated, and you know, this process is also going to get more and more complicated if this is anything to go by. So, you know, the simpler set of rules we can all sort of work to, the simpler everything is, and that was one of the beauties of you know, actually crypto and DAO. It's brutal in some respects, but it's also clean and fair in other respects, because okay, you know, there is a corruption in terms of, you know, who has what money and stuff like that, but yeah, old world corruption is much worse in my opinion. And one of the things is that the larger group of people that, you know, if you end up with a committee overseeing things and all of that type of thing, the bigger that gets, in my view. You know, I think you need a committee to carry out actions and that type of thing. But honestly, I hope we don't see this getting more and more political with more and more complicated, you know, debates. Because let's not forget that we're going to be competing with people like Facebook. So we could be like, you know, scratching our navels, worrying about our voting mechanism, and meanwhile, the future viability of this platform will be undermined by, you know, competitors who are offering a better user experience, because that's where their communities are focused on, and not on the politics of it.
And you're not wrong, because there are a number of virtual worlds, as everyone knows, on this chat that are getting on a pace and really looking to eat everyone's lunch, including ours.
So we need to quickly, honestly, and just to that degree, we need to quickly solve the individual challenges that have appeared here. You know, allowing the districts to be able to access their voting power, I think, is at the top of the priority list. Toonpunk already mentioned that there might be a way to solve that, which honestly, if that's an issue that gets solved without this proposal, then it, you know, without moving forward with delegation, then the conversation around delegation has to change, because now things that were essential to why people were voting for that now are feasible. So now what is left in that proposal is just the ability to delegate to anyone anonymously, which I think, you know, is certainly a topic of discussion, but I don't think we're anywhere close to having a viable structure where we can do so in a way where we can honestly say we're mitigating the risks to our best abilities. If this isn't about, you know, having a good idea, this is about mitigating the risks. And I think that's where we need to center conversations moving forward. Isn't this is what we want, but what are the risks associated with what we want?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something quickly. I'm actually in the Rarible DAO, and you know, it's decentralized as well. What they have that I like what you're doing right now, you know, is that you have a community call. So maybe there could be some arrangements of, like, I don't know, they do it every week. We don't have to do it every week, you know. But something in the form where we can discuss the ideas that are happening, because that's what they do in Rarible, and it's working perfectly. You know, they approve stuff and do many things. It's a little bit more centralized than us, because from what I'm noticing in Decentraland, it's like we're way more decentralized. And even here, when I see it, the amount of people that are currently in this voice chat are much greater than what I see in Rarible. But you know, I think community calls will help. And I was actually talking with, I think it was HP Pribiakos back in March or February. I remember there was a problem about the DAO, and I mentioned it to him. I was like, you know, it doesn't seem kind of good that it's based off the amount of mana that you have, because, you know, some people can have like greater power. But then he said, compared to the amount of landowners, there's a bunch of people outside of Decentraland that have a lot of mana. But I don't, not necessarily because you own mana means that you know about the game per se, because I started as a mana owner, and I didn't know anything about Decentraland until I started to figure out more what it was, and then I got hooked up, and I really loved the community, So there has to be a better way of doing the DAO governance automatically, but I think the community calls should be done so that we can discuss these things, and approve things that are like changing to the game, because that's what they do in Rarible, and it's been working fantastic.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention, Hydrazone. I appreciate you stepping in, because Kevin and I spoke about this offline before we had this call, and I said I'd be willing to dedicate resources that I have to set up a community town hall and grow this into some form of a discussion, because I think that's one thing that's come out of any of this is, bottom line, this is probably going to get voted through. Secondly, the wording in the proposal language is pretty sparse and very vague. Not once does it mention liquid democracy, yet that's a rebuttal for the proposal. So I think there's a couple things to take away from this whole conversation. One is the conversation, and I'm willing to dedicate resources with Kevin to make sure these things happen on a weekly basis, or even more, bi-weekly. I think as things grow, this community will grow, and this town hall and forum will grow. And secondly, people who are creating proposals, you really need to think about what you're doing. I think you really need to think long and hard and research your topic and put your research on paper in a cohesive manner, because there's a lot of holes in arguments, especially in this one, that can go both ways, and it comes off as very misguided. So from my perspective, those are two key takeaways that I think everyone in the community can benefit from.
Guys, would it be possible to add something to this conversation?
Of course, Swiss. You're always welcome here. Appreciate you. Please add.
I wanted to say that the DAO is a tool for a common purpose and a common goal we all have together. And I think the big players around this table should be much more conscious of that and be the bigger person here, and see that the community, the people who are active, the people who produce media, the people who make noise, the people who bring some life into this dead space, they are extremely scared and dissatisfied and almost rebellious at this point in time. And the only thing I have seen right now is just pure resistance, uninformed conversation, and very little thought that has been put into this from the perspective of community. Everyone is looking out for themselves, except maybe for Baus. I feel like he has, shown a little bit an understanding for us. And I think, independent of the mechanics of the DAO, we need to be sure that all of these segments of the community have a positive experience inside Decentraland, so everyone can do their job right. It just doesn't feel like this right now. It feels like people want to accumulate voting power for something that doesn't even exist yet. There is nothing to vote on worthwhile at this point in time. What do we want to accumulate all of that stuff for? What do we need all these rules for? And definitely not for wearables, for example, right? So it's way too early for this conversation. And I think our reaction was appropriate here. And I'm really happy that all of these guys came out and showed their presence here. So just take note of this, please, and help us instead of opposing us.
Hey, I want to agree with Swiss there. Stinky Scrub here, just wanted to chime in. And yeah, it's really just people who enjoy this world and the events and the small, there's a lot of small land that, I love to see. I just want to make sure that all of the reasons that I love Decentraland for aren't going to be affected by this. That's basically it.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point there, Swiss. Around because as complexity increases, and we get wearables, and we get teleportation across multiple virtual worlds, and game skins, and the ability to fluidly move from one world to another. People are going to flock into this space, and it'd be nice to see some of the unused properties maybe being given to people who really want to develop them. I don't mean sort of own them, but just allowed to build and do stuff and create that build out that sort of sense of action and things going on and new stuff happening.
This is awesome. I have to say, I'm really proud of the community. I'm really proud of us getting together, having respect, and listening to one another. I think that we'll see what people do moving forward, but I think regardless, we hope that at least it sounds like at this point we're willing to revisit how to move forward with this notion of delegation less vague. I think to that degree we could easily, create a more segmented solution, a series of solutions. So to that degree, I think we're talking about a couple different things. How do we want to proceed? Is there anyone that has any ideas for next steps on what we want to do here? Do we want to just let this vote go and see how things progress? That's A. Do we want to put a new proposal together, maybe with the 3 elements that we've spoken to? Maybe Morris, if you've already, maybe you're willing to segment these, which you've already put in your existing proposal, and to do different proposals. What do you think?
You're asking me to take down the proposal and cut it up into pieces? That's what you're asking?
To address this specific thing. So, for instance, delegation for districts to be able to self-delegate their voting power. And then on the other hand, maybe delegation of rights for individuals to other individuals.
If someone votes for voting power on one, it has the same effect. So I don't think splitting it up is genuine, because that really just hides what happens if you do voting power delegation.
I think you need to clarify there, because I think that
voting power delegation is like a couple lines of code in the snapshot proposal, or the snapshot protocol. It solves both of those at the same time. So
yeah, but not everybody wants both of those, is what we're saying. That both of those issues aren't something that people can necessarily.
But if you vote yes on one and no on the other, where does that leave the DAO?
That leaves it with districts able to vote the way they want to, and that clearly that as a community, what it would say, and not to say it would be, maybe people do vote it through, willing to say people can delegate outwards to anyone. Even if it does, I think it's important because it gives people the opportunity to decide on what they want and what they don't want, instead of being forced to say we have to accept what we don't want because of something that we do want. Does that make sense?
But it's the same.
It's a bit like the Swiss canton political system, isn't it? It's a bit like the Swiss canton voting system that Swiss can tell us all about. Ironically.
Well, I just want to know, Morris, what if we tackled the technicalities of cold storage and voting with cold storage wallets? Let's just break it down piece by piece, because it's not going to be broken down piece by piece on the proposal. It's going to go through everybody.
So you're suggesting make a proposal that says solve cold storage problem.
No, I'm asking you. I'm asking you if.
Hold on.
No, I'm asking you a question. Can the cold storage? If the cold storage. Okay. I'm asking you if the cold storage problem was fixed, would you still proceed with the second inactive to active voter delegation?
I would still propose voter power delegation. Yes.
Okay, and I think when you do that, you need to, at least, no one knows what liquid democracy is or quantitative voting. At least I don't.
I think that's quite complex in the real world, isn't it? I don't think anyone's solved that yet.
Right, we're trying to solve that on day 3 of the DAO.
Right, a suggestion for another proposal is that a slight variation on this is that you have, that we enable, it's the halfway house, is that we could, have a process whereby, we put in a proposal say that, Decentraland, can enable a delegated vote at their discretion, the foundation, and we could vote to trust the foundation for a period of time, and we could cap that period of time to solve this from a decentral games perspective, to solve it from a Vegas City perspective, at the cost of doing some KYCs for a period, for 3 months, for 6 months, to actually put it through in a way that kind of forces us to address it, but while buying time to deal with it in a trusted way. Like we still lean on Decentraland Foundation. There's still a huge trust element. This isn't a trustless community yet, so let's just trust Decentraland to find a way of processing this, even if it requires some KYCing, and then in 3 months from now or 6 months from now, we'll have had the benefit of time to look for alternatives that appease everybody, and then at least it wouldn't stop things just moving forwards, and then not allow this issue to kind of become a roadblock to other things in the DAO that need to be talked about as well.
I think it's a sensible decision to build in safety valves to critical decisions that go through the DAO. That makes complete sense to me.
100%.
I'm still confused on if we can figure out the cold storage issue, why are we even discussing delegation?
I think that's the next. I think that's the next step beyond this, where is to say, is there a healthy kind of delegation? And honestly, I'm undecided on. I feel like I still need to learn more, because I feel like I've learned a lot just by hearing Morris talk about it, just by hearing different people in the community. Deep Thought, we definitely appreciate your input, and everybody, like, there are benefits, but what we need, the checks and balances aren't in place for us to necessarily say we've mitigated the risks. So I think having something basic where we can undeniably say we know what we're voting for, i.e. allowing the districts to really manage their voting power effectively. I think that's a next step that we can move forward with, and then keep the conversations going. And honestly,
the first point though is not political.
I was just going to say,
the first point is not political. The second point is very political. So I'm trying to get at the root of the proposal. If we can get step one figured out, that's not political. The second part is very political.
I agree with you, Lostrom. I think you raise a really good point, and something that we're going to come up against, particularly with complex technical solutions, that we need to argue devil's advocate and look at, deconstruct the problem to its smallest components. So, like you said, question: can we solve cold storage? As an issue. I think what you're saying is pretty key there. Can we or can't we?
Yeah, I agree with you.
They don't have to one with the other. I mean, I feel like you solve cold storage, that doesn't mean that now we have delegated voting. I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah, no, I know. I agree. I'm just saying, I think I'm trying to, for everybody out there that is maybe scratching their head, there's two parts to the proposal. One is allowing cold storage holders to access their voting power. And the second part is delegating that voting power to other users and delegating the delegations. So one is a technical part, and the second is a political part. And I'm trying to ask why, if the first part is solved, why is the second part even an issue? And that's where I'm really to read at it.
No, you're right. That's what I'm agreeing with. I'm saying you can decouple them, and so I'm really asking.
In day 3 in the DAO, that's why I'm getting slightly perturbed that the answer hasn't been brought forward as to what is the motive for option 2 if you solve option 1.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think to that matter, at least Morris, how do you feel about at least making both this one proposal, break it up into 2 separate, because it could be as simple as, rather than having to wait a week to hear whether or not this goes through and having a back and forth online about and a continued debate online, we can simply cancel the proposal and in the next 2 days have a new viable, have 2 proposals out that address those issues individually. At least then, even if people decide to vote completely and say yes on both, at least then there's no question that was at least decided appropriately in a way that wasn't necessarily lumping together 2 very, very different challenges we're trying,
Yeah, I mean, I just want everybody to understand one is technical and one is political. And I just don't have an answer from anyone on the political part of it.
Again, there's probably more reasons than just those two, to be honest. And I don't really think breaking them apart makes any sense.
How can
that is what happens if you activate that protocol. So you can vote against it if you don't believe in the snapshot voter power delegation protocol. Those are results of the protocol.
This is honestly, I feel like a lot is being said here, and honestly, Morris, I don't feel like you've acknowledged any of it. I feel like people are presenting challenges and they're saying here are issues that people have, and they're backing that up, and you're just saying no.
I understand.
Why is that
I understand. People fight when there's a change. Okay, this is what happens. This is a new system that people don't know much about. I recognize that. Crypto enables liquid democracy. Liquid democracy is supposed to introduce equality. You guys are fighting it, introducing cases about the whales taking over. The whales can take over if they want to. They have that ability right now. You want an equalizer? This will help it. If the whales decide to back something that somebody who doesn't have much voting power puts forth, that's because they support it. But you could also have a situation where a ton of people can come together because they support something, and at least you can see the vote in lump sum that says we've come together for this to happen.
But if you want the optics of the vote versus I can go get 10 people and vote and find 100,000, right? That's my point is the political part is it doesn't have to be a delegation. So my point is, why can't you decouple it from, why does it have to be all or nothing?
But you don't have to delegate your votes. Hold on. You don't have to delegate your votes. No one's telling you to do so. And you can rescind your delegation immediately.
Why can't I go get Miles and Maddie right now, who are whales, who control the conversation, and say, Maddie, Miles, whatever quid pro quo we have, vote on this proposal. That currently exists. And I'm okay with that for right now.
Why are you okay with that but not in a different scenario?
But I'm not okay with the ability to amass the voting power and not have to go do the legwork for every proposal. That's my problem.
First of all, it's rescindable immediately. That's the whole point. If somebody doesn't agree with what you're doing, your power can be stripped immediately.
But you're saying inactive people will give it to you. So how active are they going to be if they're active enough to disagree with your proposals, but they're not active enough to vote on the proposals themselves? That is where I see the optics of a shady proposal. Not once did you mention in your proposal liquid democracy. Not once in your proposal did you mention quantitative voting. Not once. And so, like I said, what's been brought about in this conversation is not the decision of the proposal. It's the outcome of the community coming together in a town hall format. And it's understanding that proposals need to be in depth. They need to be thorough. You throw around liquid democracy, moving towards a democracy. No one knows what that is. I didn't know that until I talked about it last night offline.
I think to James's point as well, sticking in safety valves where we're not quite sure entirely of the future outcome, for various factors is also a good suggestion. Guys, I think the core problem here for us is right now that we were surprised by the fact that Decentral Games came in and just, decided the outcome. Now, the thing is, we realized that their motivation was this cold storage issue, apparently. So now if we could split that up, Decentral Games could still have their vote, it could still pass through, and we could have an illusion of having an actual election used tool, enjoy the whole decentralized idea until we wake up 6 months down the line realizing it's still not actually decentralized. But give us at least a couple of months enjoying this idea. But coming in on day 3 and just immediately telling everybody, this whole thing doesn't actually make any sense, and it doesn't matter even if all of you come together to vote, you will not even beat one big player. So I think just from a business point of view, you need to make sure that the community at least has possibility to use the tool for more than 3 days before you come in arguing in this way. And this whole liquid democracy thing, if you actually read it, I have my doubts that this actually applies to Decentraland and if it actually is such a superior concept in the first place. But this is maybe something we can talk about tomorrow, since this is beyond this conversation. So Morris, are you talking about snapshot in Matic?
Yes.
Okay.
And yet one of the outcomes with this, though, is that even though, for everything just Swiss just said, and yet the outcome would, the short-term effect would be to enrich the democracy and actually probably, bring many more voices to this table. So, for example, instead of, people like Carl Fravel and myself, who have been here since day one, we would have a nice vote as well, and our voices would count. So, and I know that's an outcome here, but for me, I think that you can't fight corruption. I think that these things, whatever mechanism exists, my big concern here is actually, and maybe this is a dimension to think about it. I'd be more worried about, for example, some wrongdoing with the delegated vote from like an exchange's wallet or a huge mana wallet than I would be a land wallet, because I think that inactive lands, there may be lots of inactive lands, but it's going to be a nightmare trying to go around, like hundreds of wallet addresses, trying to get in touch with people to have a delegated vote. Whereas if you've got a mana, actually wallet with 30-40 million mana in it, and that's where I see that as more of a risk. So maybe one perspective on it is to think about this in terms of land, and actually like allow the delegated land vote, but not the mana vote.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why we need to change that.
For the technicality discussion, that's kind of strange, man. Like, you would rather have like a issue fixed down the right, somewhere down the line, alienating all of the active members in your community. Why would you do that? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's more important.
Swiss devil's advocate, devil's advocate though, is that I represent 800 people in the community who are here in December 2017. So that's, and I'm not disagreeing with the security things here, but the fact of the matter is that the way things are now, those people don't have a voice. Those 800 people who actually were the true community members, the ones who actually formed things like Decentraland University and Decentraland Museum and Festival Land and so on. So whatever way you look at it, from the counterpoint to your argument is that the current system's unfair. So it's actually restricting the voice. So I think what we need to get to is a low risk way of enabling decentral games to have their land in a multi-sig or cold storage to enable a district vote. And I think as a Deep Thought kind of agrees as well, the way of doing that at the moment is probably going to involve a trust of the Decentraland Foundation, and then they can prevent bad actors, because we trust them in so many ways anyway, and that's a relatively immediate fix to this, and then there can be a long-term solution, and then there isn't a high pressure to resolve these difficult technical challenges.
I think so. I think leave it at that, and to say, right now I'm pretty sure, Boss mentioned he was okay with looking at this from a divided standpoint in terms of dividing this proposal into various options. I hope that means that, Morris, if you're okay with that, or if you feel like you want to move forward with the current proposal, I can, or somebody else can put together two different proposals where we can vote on, because what happens then? What if we have two proposals in the DAO that, the polls that, contradict each other? I'd be curious to know what happens then. Like, what if we put together a poll that says delegation is only allowed in this specific way, after the poll says, what happens there?
Yeah, because ultimately everyone wants the best for everyone, right? In the ideal scenario.
Yeah. What if?
Well, I think Kevin, these are non-binding. So, as the foundation, and maybe Toonpunk can chime in here, but as I kind of have some insight into that, and he has way more. It would be a decision if you have a yes on one hand and a no on another. Like I said, I don't understand why we can't figure out the technical aspect and maybe take that yes proposal, and then the proposal of not delegating votes. Maybe the foundation finds that that's too early to enact, and it solves a lot of problems with the number one issue. I'm still asking for why the number two exists if we can figure out how districts or cold storage wallets can overcome this technical security problem. I don't even see why number 2 even exists, to be honest with you. But I think Toonpunk could probably opine more on that if he would like. But yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to the foundation, right? So Kev, you keep talking, can we switch to proposals? That's not going to happen. I know, from this conversation, Morris is not going to do that. And I don't want to talk for him, but it doesn't sound like it. So we all need to understand, some of the outcomes of this conversation. And I'm still trying to get an outcome of why number 2 exists if we solve number 1.
I think definitely this is one of those things where, just like last one said, why go much further than that? Why do we have to put 2 things in one if we're really just trying? I think this is like trying to swallow too much at once. I would definitely think I would like to hear, and I'm going to propose that, at this point, if anyone is there a district, if there are districts that haven't voted on this, that understand that people are willing to solve the challenge that, that's being addressed in terms of allowing districts to vote with their, having, getting over this technical issue.
Yeah, we can't vote. That's why we haven't voted, because we can't.
So
because we haven't got the vote.
How about this? In order for this even to be a fair decision, I believe that it's essential that we bring the districts into this decision. We can't move forward without having the districts not being able to vote on this. That would be irresponsible. I think ultimately the right thing to do, and you don't have to agree with me, but I think the right thing to do would be for DG to vote against this so that we can actually get the districts the ability to vote and partake in the decision around this. And anything otherwise would be to say, to negate their right to partake in the voting around this decision, which impacts their districts and the whole community. And if DG doesn't want that, and if DG doesn't want to do that, then it becomes clear to the community that, that ultimately that accepting the input into from districts into this conversation isn't a priority. That's what it shows. But I'm not saying that's the case. But
yeah, Kev, I would love to hear from the yes side. From the yes side, Kev, if we solve number 1, what do you guys think about number 2? Because decoupling these, I think, is pertinent. And so I'd love to hear from the yes side, because I agree with the first part. I think that should happen. I did totally wholeheartedly disagree with the second part. I would like to hear that.
Why don't you launch a new proposal with only the first component, and Decentraland Games changes their votes on a new proposal?
Oh, hold on, Swiss. I love awkward silences. So please, anybody on the yes side, if you have a rebuttal to why, if we solve number 1, we have to move forward with number 2, please inform us on the other side so that we can be better educated as to why number 2, in your eyes, should be moved forward if we solve number 1.
Again, Lasham, I'm going to repeat what I said before, which is I merely listed 2 reasons that I can think of. I truly believe there's more reasons than just 2, and they should all be listed in one spot so you understand the outcome of implementing voter power delegation in the snapshot protocol, because that's what it's about. Should we implement that? And this is the effect. And there's more effects that haven't been listed because even I didn't know them. And we're talking about them, and people should explore them, but it's about activating that particular protocol.
Okay, and in your proposal, I would love to hear that. I don't know what liquid democracy is.
And let's hear something from the yes side that isn't Morris, because this is becoming just a single person who's trying to.
I was just going to say, because you're talking about Matic, right, and cathedrals of code, etc. That doesn't really sort of break down the deep technicalities of the SWAT protocol on Matic. That DAO proposal. I might be a noob here, but there's quite a bit in that, isn't there? With security implications and a whole bunch of stuff. I don't want to talk out of line, but I'm just sort of stating it from a technical perspective.
No, that's a great point. But is there still anyone on the yes side other than Morris who's willing to talk about this notion that Lastrom's saying is if we can solve the cold storage issue for districts so that they can vote, why are we going to bring through that the second element, which is the delegation piece that raises the political concern? And honestly, to that degree, I think that if there's no one else who's willing to speak up to that, I think, to be honest, this is clearly people are willing to.
It's a shame because I was trying to get somebody into this meeting just now, but I don't think he can make it. But someone with a very valid voice who thinks that the answer should be yes, then that's the president of the Blockchain Education Network. And he thinks absolutely yes, because he is actually a delegate, and he thinks, and according to him, most DAOs actually have this enabled, but it's a shame because the thing is that he would more eloquently argue some of the things you're losing by getting rid of this. So I kind of think I'd like to see a secure mechanism while we think it through. So I think that if there could be a Waygate of Decentraland on a human level, then that's like the perfect solution. But I have to say that the mechanism is there, and as technological change comes in, I think that normally, all things considered, it's the principle of Occam's razor. Out of all the alternatives, usually it's the simplest one that's the correct answer. And the thing is I can see this spiraling into all sorts of complexity and procedure, and there is a risk there, but I think there's far bigger risks for Decentraland, and that's my concern, is that this type of issue is going to dominate the DAO, and I think that is at this point right now. I think that I see the security risk, and I think we could ease our way into it and find. Just address that as a short-term thing.
I agree. Before we activate inactive voices, I think before we're activating inactive votes, we need to activate the votes for the people who are active, people in the district. Let's get that done first, and then address more matters from there. I think that is the cleanest way to approach this, where at least we can be sure that there's no contesting. To that degree, it just seems like a cleaner way to approach this matter.
To your point, James, DAOs do evolve into automated processes, but I think your point around checks and balances is a good one.
I have actually a question, and this is with regards with the code. This is for Morris. So just to make sure that I'm understanding why you want to do the delegation, is because you don't want to expose a wallet to be hacked. Is that correct?
That's how I first discovered that this wasn't turned on by default. Yes, I went to assign my assets from my cold storage to my avatar. And then I bumped into, this part of the protocol was specifically not implemented, where it's implemented in a majority of these DAOs.
Okay, and so my other question is then, I'm still getting new into coding in blockchain, but is there a possibility that if you want to delegate your voting power to another wallet, could it be another wallet that has no voting power whatsoever? It can only be transferred once. Do you think that's possible as a solution? So only one transfer per extra, wallet. Like, let's say, for example, I have, 30.
I don't know the answer to your question, but I'll ask the devs in the snapshot Discord.
Because if that's the case, then that solves the problem, because you can delegate, your entire power to a wallet, and it can only be sent once to that wallet. Like, if the code checks for that wallet that it has more than just one transfer, then it's not going to allow it. I think that will be a solution if the devs are able to do that.
That is one solution. That's good. But I think to that matter, I hope that, I think we've had a very healthy discussion here. I think ultimately, where the consensus lies is that the community hopes that the large stakeholders who are placing voting power for this particular proposal will consider moving against it so that we can identify the individual challenges and move from there. If you don't choose to do that, that's totally on you. And I'll just say we are all going to, realize that it's not going to be one proposal that's going to change everything. This is going to be a long process of discovering and fixing and readdressing issues as they come up. So pace yourself, don't wear yourself out. This is exactly why delegation can be useful in that way, because not everyone is going to want to partake in every discussion here. So to that degree, I think, if we start at a place where we all can agree at, we're all going to be happier and we're going to be more productive as a community. I think we can all agree that in order to make a best decision, we're not going to do that to our best ability without having the districts partaking in that decision-making process. I think before moving ahead here, we need to have an opportunity for the districts to actually vote instead of having them locked out of this vote for the technical issue. I think we solve the technical issue first so that we can readdress the delegation vote at that point.
Yeah, I agree. And just one last thing that I would like to share with everybody is that, the current DAO system as it's made, I feel like it needs to be restructured, not because of the, all of us involved here, but because of the potential of someone or a company coming from the outside and owning land and owning a bunch of mana. We have to be careful with that. The current DAO, I discussed this again a long time ago with HP Riakos, and he was basically saying, if you can, he was telling other people too, like, if you can give a solution, that'll be great. I think this is a chance for all of us to kind of start thinking, having in our minds how to fix this DAO to have a better way of representing all of us.
Absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with that. And
Kev, I think too, we should, I just want to say last point before, I go where we shut it down is I want to continue this community town hall. I want to be a part of it, however way I can, whatever way I can. If we dedicate my server, Peanut Butter server, dedicate resources to it, build something in world to have as a meeting place. I think it says a lot about who is in the world simultaneously while on the call. I know not a lot of people can do both, but that is a level of activism as well. So I think getting people engaged on both platforms and across everywhere is something that I want to get behind. So regardless of what happens with this proposal, is separate from the fact that I want to continue this community and building out what we're discussing and make it open for anybody. I want everybody and anybody to be available within Decentraland and on Discord anywhere. So I'm happy and I'm available to make that happen.
Amazing. And you know what? I'm taking a picture right here, right now, of everybody. Make some emote. If you're in world right now, throw some emotes. I need some emotes in world. We're gonna get a group picture of this very first town hall that we've done together, and we've made it through, I think, very respectfully, very able to listen and discuss these ideas. Any closing thoughts, Toonpunk, that you want to offer, James? Anything that I think a lot of us look up to, a lot of the OGs and developers and the foundation. We obviously lean on your expertise. Is there anything you want to leave us with in this, as we close off?
I just want to say again that it's great that everyone's engaging and talking. This is your community. That I'm here to represent the foundation, but we're trying to stay out of it as much as we possibly can because we want you to lead this. So having this talk and doing these things weekly is really, really cool.
Amazing. Mission accomplished in that way in itself. Thank you, everybody, to everybody who made time to come here, everybody who had the courage to express their opinions on a global scale. I get intimidated here. I feel like sometimes I might not, I try to not say things so definitively because we don't know. We have to keep learning. And I think we're doing that as a group. If we keep doing this, it will be very healthy for the community. So Lastrom and I will keep you posted. At this point, expect it to happen next week, same time, 7 p.m., same place. And we will get together to talk about the next issues, the next challenges. We'll be here ready to take things on. Thank you so much for Miles and everybody who came through. Thank you so much for Morris for coming through to discuss this. I can definitely say it's not easy being somebody. I feel like Morris very bravely approached this with he went with what he thought is right, and he stood up and he said that. And I think we should all appreciate and respect that. And you don't have to agree with him, but, I think we can all appreciate, and really encourage people expressing something that they feel like they can stand behind. And thank you, everybody, for coming out. We'll see you next week. Decentraland Report signing off. Appreciate you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, guys.
Go enjoy the real world. Have a glass of wine.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.